Hello friend, welcome back. In our all previous videos, I have already discussed about that views, how can working with the view, how can create the template, and also how can working with the model. And with this model here, I also defined some of the model. Into the model, I have also insert some of the data, right? And also now we can actually access our admin panel. So that is one of the building admin panel, as I told you before. So now I want to read all this data. So here I want to read all this data, and in this data I want to visible it in our page. So how can do that work? It's pretty much simple things if you actually understand that main mechanism. Like I show you, if you want to do that work, first of all, right now we don't need this. I just remove everything from here. So first of all, you have to go to your apps. That means in our application, into this application, that is our views, right? So here I have defined two of these models. So into this our applications, in our applications, that is our models. So into these models, I have created two of this class. One is the musician, another is the album, right? So first of all, we have to import two of these in our view page area. So now into this view area, I want to input it. So from our fast app, that means fast app, and from to the fast app, I want to access our models. So right now I just simply define as the models, and then I want to input two of this data. That means here I have already created two of this class. One will be as a musician. So one will be as a musician, another will be as an album. So I just simply define another will be as an album, right friend? So here I have defined all that input data. So now if you want to visible it, first of all, you have to define that things with a specific one of the variable. Okay, so right now in our index method, so here I have already created one of the function, that is our index function. Into this function area, we have to do that work. So here I just simply define one of the variable, and I just take that variable as a musician list. Okay, musician in the underscore list. So whatever the variable you want to take, you can take that things on here, and after that you have to define your table name. That means in our class name as a musician. Into this musician, I want to define all that our objects, right? So if you want to define that, then you have to define as objects. So I just simply define as objects, and then if you want to also define that as a order by, if you want to visible it as a order by, you can define that order and underscore by. Okay, sorry, order by, and into this order by I define it should be order by as a whatever you want. So if you want to make that things order by as a first name, last name, other instrument, whatever you want. Okay, so now I want to make the things it should be order by as a first name. So that is our field name. So I just simply define our first name. Okay friend, so that is actually the procedure for in our Django. But if you use that in our PHP, what exactly we did into the PHP, we did like that way, like we define as a select one of the query. Okay, right, we define the select all from our table name. Our table name will be as a musician. So musician, and from to the musician you have to define that order, and by order by your field name, that means our field name as a data, that means first name, right? So in PHP we actually define that query. In Django we have to define that like that way. I hope you can well understand about it. So now here I get all the data from our musician table. Here I take all the data and take the things with this variable, right? And now here we have to pass all the data in our dictionary. That means in our diction. Okay, so here we have to pass it. So if you want to pass it, you have to pass it with the key. So for the reasons here, in particular that area, I want to define one of the key as a musician. Okay, I just take one of the key as a musician, and in particular that position here I want to define our this variable. So I get all the data and take the things with this variable, right? So now I just simply pass that variable on here. Okay friend, so now in our return render request, I have already passed our this diction with this context. In Laravel, what exactly we did, if you already know about that Laravel framework, into Laravel framework we pass it with the compact, right? So with this compact we pass all the data. So now here I just simply define that in Django with the diction, and into this diction I just pass our this key data. So that is our variable. In particular, that variable, I have all the data, right? So now I just pass this diction. Here you can see into the context, I just pass it. So now we can actually access all the data in our fast app here that have also one of the index.html, right? So here I already passed some of the request. So now we can actually access all the data in our particular this index.html page. And also in our diction area, I have defined some of the IDs. So now I want to actually change that text, then it will be better. Like here I define that this is a list of musicians. So I just simply define this type of one of the text right now. I have already discussed about that things with you, how can display it. So now I want to display, before I display our ID. So here I display that ID in our index.html. So now I want to display all that our database data. So that is our all the database musician data. So now I want to use it in our index.html. So now open our index.html. So now if you go to our index.html, so that is in our template, into the template, that is our fast app, and that is our index.html, right? So here I want to display all that our data. So I have already loaded our static all the data. There is a title. So if you want to change that title, so right now I want to display all that our musician list data. So better I want to define as a musician list all the data. That will be our title, and that is our body. So in the body area, I want to do here like in our h1 tag, into this h1 tag I want to display our this ID. So that means our text ID. So I just simply cut it from here, and better I want to use it on particular that position. So that is actually the ID I have already defined. So here I have already defined in our dictionary area, that is our ID, into this ID, that actually the text, right? So now it will be displayed in particular that area. So right now we don't need this. I just simply remove it. I also remove our images, because here I want to get all the data from our database table, and I want to visible it on here. So for doing this, better I want to display it with using some of the table. Okay, so here I define some of the table, and also we have to finish the table. So I just simply finish that table. Okay, and then also for this table I want to define some of the class. Then it will be better. I want to define class, or rather than I want to define another border. Okay, I just simply define the border as a one border, and then I will define the tier, that means the table row. So into this table row we have to finish it. So I just simply finish our this table row, and into this table row area I want to take some of the th, that means the table head. Okay, so I just simply define the th. Also we have to finish the th. So I just simply finish it. So into this th area I want to do, first of all I define that as a fast name, right? So for this musician I have the three field as a fast name, and then I want to display our another one will be as a last name, and also I define, if you go to our fast app, and that is our models. And here you can see I define the first name, last name, and the instrument. So I just simply define another one as a instrument. Okay, I just name it as an instrument. Perfect. So now I want to get all the data, so which I have already defined that things in our view. I get all the data and take the data with this variable, and also I pass it with this key as a musician, right? So now we get all the data with this. So now I want to for each it. So if you want to add that for each into the Django, how can do that work? It will be pretty much same things. Here you have to define that curly bracket and the double percentage. Okay, so into this double percentage, here you have to define that your for loop. I just simply define as a for, and I just name it as a row, and row in your key. So here I have defined that key name as a musician. So I just simply copy it, and now here I just simply define that in our musician. So I have already get all the data, that means from our musician all the data, and take the things with this key area, right? So now here I just call it in row. So now if you want to visible all that your field data, you have to visible it with this row, right friends? So here we started one of the for loops. We have to finish it. So after that I want to finish it with this curly bracket. It should be the same command, double percentage, and into this double percentage here you have to define as and for. Okay, I'm just simply defining it, and particular that area I want to define our tier again. So I just simply define as a tier, that means a table row, and then I just simply define as a tier close, and then in particular that position I want to display all that our TD data, that means a table data. So I just simply define a TD and then finish that TD. So here I want to display our fast name. So for the fast name I have defined that field name, our field name as a fast name for our musician, right? So now I just simply copy it, and as I told you, here I get all that our data with this key as a musician. So if you want to visible it, you have to visible it with this row. Okay, so here I define as a for row. So whatever the things you will put on particular that area, you can display that name with this. Okay, so right now for education purpose I'm using that row. So here if you want to change it, you can change it from to this position. So now I want to visible it, then you have to define the double curly bracket, and then with this row. Okay, so with this row you have to visible it. So I just simply define as a row and then our field name. So I have already defined our database field name, that is our fast name, right friend? So now I just simply copy it, because here I also want to display our last name and the instrument. So our another field as a last name, copy it. Here I define our with this row our last name and then the instrument. So I just simply copy it, and here I just simply paste it. So friend, that's all you have to do. Okay, so here I have defined our for each loop. So that is our for each loop. Into this for each loop I display all that our table data. So here I just define that for each loop in Django, and then I just end this for each loop. Okay, so then there is our static load data, and also here I loaded our static CSS file. So that is our MyStyle CSS file, and here I defining it. So with our text will be as h1, so it should be as a red, right? Now let's check this out. If you now click as a save all, like I just click as a save all, so I just click as a save all and make that sure our server is running. Yeah, our server is now perfectly running. So now I want to refresh our page. So now that is our page, refresh it. Yes, now you can see friend, now that is actually our ID is visible, and for this ID I have defined some of the CSS for the h1 tag, and you can see it's now become changed. And also I define our table, and into the table I have the three field as a first name, the last name, and the instrument, right? So now you can see that is all the data actually comes from our database. That is not that static data. So that's all that our dynamic data is now comes from our database table. So into this database you can see there is actually the Jackma. So into the Jackma, and that is actually the violin. So here it's now perfectly visible as a Jack, and our last name as a Ma, and then our instrument. And then also I just define first name as a Kazi, the last name Aryan, and the instrument as a guitar. So friend, I hope step by step it's become very much easy to you, because here I think you can well understand about it, how you can read all the data from your database, how you can run your for each loop. So that is our for each loop, and here if you want to visible your data from to the database, how you can visible it in our index template area. So now it should be very much clear to you. So as I told you, don't worry, step by step we'll go more deep, and after end of this course you will have much better idea about the Django, and everything will be very much easy to you. So next video I want to start a new session. It's about the Django forms. So how you can actually deal with the Django forms. Next video I will show you that things with the live example. So thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.